All right. Had a few technical difficulties. Always fun.
Oh yeah.
It's the first podcast, so that's gonna happen.
How many IT professionals does it take to set up a podcast? I don't know.
Correctly, we haven't hit that yet. I don't think we have enough.
We'll find out when we stop recording.
Get a committee, do a Slack on it. I'll get a Gantt chart. We'll see if we can figure that out, actually.
Only if it's agile.
Right? That's the real question. This is the Dr. Druid Defense Against the Dark Arts podcast. I am Dr. Druid Victor Manuel, Doctor of Acupuncture and Oriental Medicine, licensed acupuncturist and private practicing Druid, instructor and acupuncturist at the Texas Acupuncture Research Institute in Dallas, Texas. Today with me is my esteemed friend, Zagareus Wolf. He's the chief magic maker for E2 Energetics and has been a Tantra and Yana yoga?
Yeah, so it's easy energetics. And yes, I've been a Tantra and Yana yoga teacher for about 10 years, both in the Bay Area and here in Austin.
Nice.
I recently got my asana training from my vinyasa practice in Austin. But in the default world, I have about 25 years in corporate work, whether that's organizational change, where I have my MBA, stakeholder engagement, or training around challenging issues like sexual harassment in the workplace violence, and just generally getting everybody to get along.
Yeah. And so this is our first podcast. The goal with this is to discuss the challenges that we face in the workplace, the challenges that arise both from general medicine in general and then acupuncture in specific. And I think they're all relative universes because we have, in acupuncture specifically, it is a very touchy-feely medicine. When you come to me for treatment, I'm going to, at the very least, I'm going to check your pulse. When I'm inserting needles, I do have to touch. I can be as far away from you as possible and try to not touch the skin, but I am going to be at the very least touching your pulse, checking the body, asking you invasive questions like, how is your poop? How's your diet? Any stress? What's going on? As opposed to a Western MD who's just going to come in and say, hey, tell me about your symptoms. I really don't care about anything else. And here's some pills. We're good. Now, if we go a step further, you can have a Western MD who, the MD that I see, Dr. Mulamala in McKinney, shout out Dr. Mu. She spends a huge amount of time with her patients. So she's very much into having a deeper discussion with you, really getting in touch. It becomes very similar to an acupuncture treatment where we're going and saying, okay, how are your daily activities? How's your sleep? How's your functionality? How's work? Where are the stresses in your day? All right, so that's that experience.
In terms of a medical experience, yes. Well, and if from an energetic point of view or from a energetic practitioner point of view, we would normally spend a great deal of time with clients in a one-on-one situation. In a workshop situation, it's very much like what group therapy would look like.
Right.
We can't really spend that much time with clients, but we're always more concerned with their overall well-being energetically and not necessarily just throwing pills at the symptoms, right? And getting to know our clients from you get into some really deep stuff. I mean, because you're talking about blockages in the chakras, you're talking about what is very likely trauma. And to be clear, I am not in any way trained or qualified to be dealing in trauma situations. I would always refer people to trained professionals for that. Okay. But I do come from a trauma-informed background. And so we always have to be careful about that when you are working with clients in a one-on-one situation, very much like what you're talking about.
Yeah, and we talked about, so the topics I want to cover today, we'll start off with this and go deeper in. I do want to get into some of the fun stuff we spoke about earlier. So one of the things that we run into in acupuncture, when we're dealing with a person who has deep traumatic issues or deep physical issues, we can get into a part where it gets very tense, very excitable. And one of the problems that can occur is that someone can be really, really intensely. I feel like I'm just asking regular, everyday questions, and then I hit a landmine where someone's like, "Oh my god!" They get suddenly excited, or they start to cry, or they have deep emotional issues that are going on. Yeah. Have you had that?
Oh, without question. I mean, so there's a couple of things there, right? The first is, I mean, there's a general principle when you're dealing in a sort of communication with people around sensitive topics, and it's this: the intent of the deliverer really has no bearing. It's really about how it's perceived by the receiver, right? So when I say that, I don't mean that the deliverer is wrong or incorrect or has done anything untoward, but when the receiver receives it in a way that triggers a trauma response, then it's up to the deliverer to either recognize that and be able to adjust, assuming they're trained in that, or for the receiver to remove themselves from the situation where they have been triggered. Meaning, I'm sorry, I have some feels about that right now. I need to take a moment. Please excuse me. And walk away, right?
And as an acupuncturist, I'm going in and I hit that landmine where the patient has a really strong reaction to something's going on. And there's two sides to this. So I have a responsibility, is what you're saying. I have a responsibility to change, pull back, adjust, to say, okay, you're in a deep space. Do you want to continue talking about this? Do you not? Can we go forward? If the person is non-communicative about it, then it's my responsibility to pull back to keep them feeling safe.
And not just to pull back, but to reground them, to remind them, where they are, what they're doing here, why you're asking them these questions, things along those lines. And you may not know, frankly, what it is that triggered them, right? It could be a question that you asked like 3 questions ago that they're still ruminating on, and all of a sudden it's like caused something. So the general rule of thumb for me is if they're in a space where they're beginning to go into non-responsiveness, then immediately stop having that conversation, immediately go into, talking about things about the here and now, right? To bring them back into the space. And then perhaps suggest a professional.
And that's part of the hubris in any profession, that we can begin to pretend that we can solve all someone's problems. But when I'm treating someone, if we are going into deep emotional work, my question is, where else are you getting service on this issue? Are you seeing a therapist? Are you seeing a psychiatrist? Or what other practitioners do you have that are helping you work through this? Because it can get intense.
Well, and I'm not a trained yoga therapist, although I do hope to continue my training in that. But there are often times when you're working with someone physically, and they come across a physical block that is actually trauma related, and you can't necessarily push through that block. You have to work with them. Sometimes,
but we're guys. We're tough.
God, yeah, right. Yeah, we have to drag our darkness out into the light and beat it into fucking submission. Right. Yeah, that's the male way of dealing with our shadows, rather than caressing it and telling it it's okay and thanking it for taking care of us for so long. Totally. Yeah.
In case you can't see the video, we're both laughing about this. This is the guys being tough is definitely the line that we are, as men, we're given from jump. People who come across my table, I'm like, especially guys who come across, they're like, yeah, I've been told to not listen to my feelings ever.
Right.
And then I'm like, all right, so cool. How are we going to deal with this unresolved anger that you've been carrying around since you were freaking 2 years old?
Yeah.
Like, what are you going to do with that? And they're like, I have no idea. I'm supposed to just stuff it back down.
Right.
Keep it in there.
Yeah, and it manifests itself in so many ways, right? I mean, so many. It becomes either you enter relationships where you're either the hero caretaker or you're being taken care of by your money, and it's very hard to sort of balance those two things into a healthy relationship if you're not healthy yourself around being able to ask for help, feel your emotions. I mean, did you see Wicked?
Yeah.
I fucking cried from like the first song. I was sobbing by the end of the movie. My partner was looking at me like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine." But you know, people just we're told not to feel our feelings. We're told that it's not appropriate to cry in public. We're told that it's not appropriate to feel pain.
Yeah.
You know, you can be a strong man and still feel all the pain in the world. You can be a strong man and mean the best when you say something or do something, and another person, man or woman, could hear it and take it wrong, and you can understand that that's not your responsibility, but it's your duty to pull back on whatever it's triggering, and to recognize that you're triggering someone, and back away, or to support them in whatever way you can.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, that's good stuff. When you talked about having clients who have trauma in the body, like stuff that's trapped, and in acupuncture, there's an interesting parallel here. So in our medicine, we talk about emotions existing in organs and organ systems and channels. So we'll be like, all right, you've got anger in the liver, right? And then the liver controls this channel of the body. Or fear in the kidneys. Fear sits in the kidneys. Sorrow sits in the lungs. Overjoy, manic depression is manic side is in the heart, and anxiety, worry is in the spleen. So those are the 5 major organ systems in Chinese medicine, and the 5 emotions that go with them. And so I do see people who have physical ailments that go right along the channels or the body parts, the organs that are involved in those emotional issues.
Wow, so you've seen like someone who has like, do you diagnose that, like you see someone with anger issues and then you go to look for it's which one?
It gets fucking wild. Like in our board exams, they're like, all right, a person who comes in who is has distending headaches, right-sided hypochondriac pain, anger. They get easily irritated when you're going through their intake, and you notice that they have, getting into the technical side of acupuncture, we would say they have a slippery pulse or a wiry pulse, where their pulse is very easily defined on both sides on both wrists, and let's say their tongue is red and usually a little thin. They've got some overactive. We would call that stagnated liver qi. Their energy of the liver is stuck, and it's not able to process this anger, and it's not going to get any better unless you deal with it. Yeah,
it's like clearing chakras, right?
I mean, it really does revolve right into that.
And again, the first time I ever saw like energy actually clearing, and when I say see, I don't mean physically see, but I could sense that the energy moving through chakras, and specifically through an area that was blocked on someone I was working with, and I started to clear it, and she started to cry, and I started to work harder to clear it, and she started to cry harder. And I sort of realized in doing this work that, I thought my intention was to help. What I was probably doing was not incredibly healthy.
Right.
In the long run, let me take that back. It was helpful to raise awareness around whatever the issue is that was causing the blockage. But my trying to forcibly clear that energy was not going to be helpful for her. So, I pulled back, did the rest of the work. She cried through the whole session. We finished. I held her, and my teacher, who was witnessing the whole thing, came over and made sure everything was okay. And she was very complimentary about the experience and said she had a lot of work to do. Specifically, it was on her throat chakra. And so it was, my point in telling that story is that this is a step-by-step process.
Yeah.
You know, you find something and it may take multiple sessions, it might take years of intense work in other areas to actually clear this blockage completely. But you've raised awareness about it. And that's the important thing there.
Yeah.
So
when you had that, and here's a thing that I run into. There are people who will have a trauma block that they don't necessarily want to work on.
Yes.
And this goes into the fun part that I wanted to talk about, where we have consent. Like, what part of, like when we're ready to work on something, everybody involved needs to be ready.
Mm-hmm.
And there's, so I'm going to use some acupuncture terminology here, but kind of like if you imagine chi as a river, you imagine energy as a flowing the river, stagnation is a dam, and we're trying to clear the dam. Now, if I go in and I'm working with someone and I'm pushing the dam to clear, that can cause more trauma, as opposed to saying, okay, how can I help the person's body organically move and get rid of this dam, and we're helping the river flow in a gentle way, and that's more clear.
Right. But you brought up the point about what if someone doesn't want to work on that, or may not just be ready to work on that. Right. And again, not a trauma professional. But having said that, I'm going to bring this into the kink community a little bit.
Go for it.
Right?
By all means.
So I'm a kinkster.
Part of the Tantra work, and for those who don't understand this, that word, and are looking it up, Googling it on your phone right now, how would you explain Tantra?
Tantra.
I always have fun explaining it.
That's a really great... people will explain it a lot of different ways. So Tantra literally means path. In Sanskrit, and Tantra in and of itself is nothing. It's a path. Like, you can have a Tantra to tying your shoe. You can have a Tantra
to tying my shoes,
right?
Okay.
Now, Tantra, as it was introduced to the Westerners in the early 1900s, all the way up to the 1970s or 80s, by folks like Osho and others before him, Tantra, Neo-Western Tantra, has become this energetic exchange exercise where we trick the body through breath and movement into an ecstatic state. And then we can use the energy that you build to either move things within yourself or to exchange energy with other people. Generally through things like eye gaze, consensual touch, all the way to red Tantra. So with yourself is white Tantra. Moving the energy within your own chakra system, exchanging with others through non-sexual, sensual touch, again, eye gazing or other kinds of touch, is pink Tantra. And then when you practice sacred sex or shared intention during sexual contact, that's red Tantra.
Okay.
There's a lot of consent there. You have to establish ahead of time that, for instance, in workshops that I've done and that I've been to, we talk about no touch below the waist, right? And that just lovingly no touch below the waist, and that just sets the stage for the public space that where the boundaries are, and that's the consent line, right? Beyond that, we also, before every exercise, have the participants, if there's going to be touch involved, indicate where in the body they do not want to be touched. Because, like we talked about earlier, you never know what's going to trigger somebody. I have a partner who gets triggered if I put my hand on the back of her head, and I'm just brushing her hair, and bam, I can trigger her. Right? But around her throat, perfectly fine. It's just you never really know. And then, of course, the throat, we won't even go into that, but the throat's a very sensitive place for most people.
And so that's the whole thing. So when we're talking about consent, when we're talking about triggering, it is, I would say, very many, if not all, many of us, I'll say many of us, have some event that is physically connected in the body where touch or experience to that area would be bring up emotions.
Sure.
We're just going to say. You can say bring up emotions. For some people it's a very traumatic experience and they're going to freak out and start crying.
My brother used to enjoy suffocating me as a kid. If you put something over my face, even in a sexual, playful way, no.
For me, it was getting beaten on my back. So my back is just a very tender spot.
Yeah.
So it's a thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is interesting. It's an interesting way to think about. And so consent comes into play, and I'm going to bring it back to the acupuncture world for a minute. In that, if I'm doing acupuncture on your body, I want to tell you what areas I'm going to be working on. Usually, they're going to be areas that you asked about. Like you're going to come in and say, I have back problems. Guess what? I'm going to work on your back. I'm going to do acupuncture on your back.
Right.
You can come in and say, there's like easily 10 different prescriptions I could give where I would do needle work on the back or stomach based on something that isn't really centered around here. So you would have, because you have energy lines that go through, you have the holographic view of the body's energy, and all of those would require, like, there's a point on the chest that's going to send energy down. So if you get feeling where you're stuck in your head, I could do a point right at the sternum. So it's right between the breasts.
Right. But if someone comes in and he says, I have a headache, and you lay them down, and you're about to put a needle in their sternum to solve their headache, you're going to say to them, I'm about to put a needle in your sternum. Is that correct? Or do you just basically say, lay back and I'm going to take care of your headache?
So that's the thing. So I have gotten to where I have those conversations more thoroughly. And I know that that's not always how we're taught.
Right.
In acupuncture school, we're not taught to say, here's all the points that I'm going to do a treatment on. Are you okay with them? We go back, in school, we get the prescription that we're going to use from the doctor who's leading us, and then we go in and just start throwing steel. This is it. This is what we're going to do. And I have found that, especially because it can, masculine to feminine. I'm treating women, or I'm treating guys, and they're like, I didn't expect, I haven't had anyone say that, but I've definitely had their bodies tighten up, and I can tell. They didn't expect to have this happen. So I'll be like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is part of the thing we're working on. And I've actually increased that now to where I say, okay, I actually have a chart of all the energy points and all the parts that we're going to work on. I'm like, let's talk about your symptoms and what parts of the body this is involving.
I think that's, I think that's really important because if there's a couple, because it's education, right? And I mean, if we back up a step and just say whether or not you believe any of this actually works or not, right? If you tell people what you're doing and why you're doing it, you're focusing their attention both on the places that you're working and on the work that you're doing. And energetically, we know that where the attention goes, the energy flows. Right? So the very act of educating them about what you're about to do would help to facilitate that.
I didn't even think about that.
And that's for believers and non-believers, right? We go back to the consent and kink thing. Like, if I'm going to if I arrange a scene with somebody and I let them know we're going to do this and this and this and this and this, and then I have an instinct to do something else that's additional, that's outside the realm of the agreements, I'm probably not going to do it in that situation. It would be very rare that I would. if I were able to communicate effectively with my partner in the scene and gain consent, but you really shouldn't be changing consent in the middle of the scene, right? And so the same thing, right? If by telling them, by making these arrangements at the very top, you're giving them the ability to say, I'm not really comfortable with you touching me on my breast, right. Or I'm not really comfortable having a needle in my thigh, or wherever, my foot, wherever it is, right? I have friends who won't let you touch their feet at all, in any way, shape, or form. And you never really know.
Yeah, that's the thing. And there's so many points on the foot, so many acupuncture points on the foot. Yeah. It's wild. Like, if you come into my clinic and we don't do any footwork, like, did you actually get acupuncture?
Yeah, right. Well, I may not be able to help you, right? Unless we can work on this thing first.
Like, that's going to be the therapy. That's what we're coming in for.
I have a foot fetishist friend I can introduce you to.
There you go.
But yeah, I mean that idea of pushing. We were talking earlier about the idea of like trying to help push people through, right? Mm-hmm. I've had it happen in the middle of a kink scene where the person I was topping wanted to go further in the middle of the scene, like asked me for it. Oh, wow. And I said no because they're in woo space, subspace. I call it subspace.
Right. They're in the middle of this. Right.
Exactly. Yeah, they're having the experience, right? Yeah. As a dom, as a responsible top, it's your job to lay the boundary lines and say, no, we agreed to this, we're sticking to this. If you would, and then after it's done, after you have done all the aftercare, if there's something they want to explore more, then you set up another session where you can go further. Right? I mean, I don't know, how would that apply in acupuncture and energetic medicine? So
in acupuncture, it applies like this. I've had this experience. I think I can relate to that. So I'm a fairly intuitive acupuncturist. I read the body, start doing the work, and this is one of the lines that I tell my students, like, if my prescription that I had before I started putting needles in is the prescription that I use at the end of the treatment, then I'm not listening to the patient. So I'm putting in my first set of needles. Let's say I'm doing needles on the hands and feet. It's called 4 gates, and they are the 4 gates of the body that allow the body to settle in and relax. And I had prescribed previously, I was like, we're going to do some work on their liver qi stagnation. We're going to do a couple of points on the head to kind of let that headache relax. We're going to do a couple of points on the forearms to kind of soothe the intestinal stagnation that occurs when your liver is binding up because your body can't go into a parasympathetic nervous system to relax. We're going to do some for the digestion. And then on the legs, I'm going to do some points on spleen 9, liver 6 to relax the liver's energy, let the liver flow, and also support the spleen, who the liver usually beats up on. They have a bad relationship. It's not good. So let's say that's my prescription.
I'm imagining a spleen in the liver.
Right? I mean, you're not wrong.
Which one's Tyson? I'm sorry.
the liver is Tyson every time. It's not good. At best, the spleen gets like the Evander Holyfield bite in sometimes and then calls it a day. So let's say I have that patient. That's my mental prescription before I start working on them. I do the 4 gates. I go up to their head, and they have such a distending amount of energy on their head that I will usually go and say, okay, how do I relieve that? I may not put any needles on their head, but now I'm going to put some needles on liver 2, liver 1, maybe even gallbladder 43 to move the energy down the body and let that go a little further. Again, it's a matter of seeing. Seeing is not really the word for it, but understanding where the energy is stuck in a person, and then helping it move from that. Now, if you are a non-energetic acupuncturist, you have a prescription, you know what's going on, you're going to use that prescription because you're not looking at the body's internal qi, which is fine. It's a very technical way to function. then one of the things you can do is check the pulse. Talk to the patient. So the pulse is a wildly good diagnostic tool.
Okay.
When I'm touching your pulse and I put a needle and I put a needle in, your pulse will change. Your body will affect your body enough to change the speed, intensity, flow of the pulse. You'll feel it. So if I put 4 needles in, check the pulse, see if it's steady. If the pulse is not steady, then the body is not fully relaxed in yet. Maybe the pulse was wiry. You're trying to get it back to a nice little wiry/slippery mode. Whatever you're trying to do, you can adjust based on that. And so, again, it's not a matter of... And so this is coming back around to... This was a really long journey.
That's okay.
Coming back around to...
We learned so much about acupuncture.
Right. It might happen.
We'll have charts that go along with it.
Yeah, that might happen in this podcast a few times, I think, actually.
I'm sure.
It's weirdly enough.
Yes, Dr. Druid.
So, let's say on that patient, this is something I've had. Let's say on that patient, they've got their top on, and I'm recognizing that their energy flow is stuck in the chest. And a normal point that I would do would be Ren 17, right in the sternum, or some of the lower Ren points again on the belly. I am not mid-treatment going to have them move their clothing, have them change. I'm not going to change up,
Right.
Especially if it's points indicated for the gallbladder 21, which is really, really good for upper body tension. If I didn't have that prescribed previously and we haven't had the conversation, we're not changing. We're not taking shirts off. We're not moving anything out of the ordinary. And again, it's a matter of, if I were to have had all this conversation and set up beforehand and said, okay, previous to starting, I'm going to have you remove your shirt because we're going to do some points on the back. We're going to do some what have you. That's fine. Totally chill. Legit.
But so I think I know the answer, but I'm curious.
Okay.
Why don't you do that? Like in a little session, why don't you stop and go, I'd like very much to work on your back or your chest for this meridian or line. Why don't we go ahead and remove your clothing, and here's a gown.
So several really good reasons. One, technically, especially if I've already got needles in.
Great.
You don't want to have somebody moving clothing around. You're going to lose a needle, get them poked in worse, what have you.
Got it.
It can get dangerous. Physically, it can get dangerous. That's not the reason. Yeah, you do know the answer to this. You do know the answer to this. It's because after someone's already on the table and they're getting into the, as you would say, what did you call it?
Subspace.
Subspace. As they're getting into that subspace, their body is relaxing.
Yeah.
If we suddenly change up, then there's going to be a tension. There's going to be a tension that gets created. There's also a matter of safety. Once you're on the table, you're in your safe space. Me changing that is taking you out of that. Right.
100%. I'm shaking my head vigorously for those not watching the video. I call it keeping them in their body.
Right? Yes. Yes.
So one of the things I find, and this is not a knock on anybody, but
that one guy.
Well, but one thing that we are not, one thing that many teachers, guides are not so experienced at is creating ritual space, where you open a bubble, you invite everybody in energetically, you close the bubble around people for what we call in pagan work being between the worlds.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And then at the end, actually closing the space and having people take their own energy back and release the energy of other people, right? Very few practitioners, whether it's a yoga class, whether it's a workshop, whether it's whatever, will actually open and close the space like that, especially in the Neo-Tantra world. And I will argue that until the day I'm done. So you should come to my future workshop on creating ritual.
I love this. I'm down. Yes, I will. I'll be there.
So my point being is that keeping them in, where do you want them? Do you want them in their head? Do you want them in their body? Do you want them in, what chakra are you sort of focusing on right now? It can be, again, where the attention goes, the energy flows, right? So I think that's very close to what you were saying, which is once you've got them in that space, where they're in their body or in subspace, to jolt them out to say, hey, I need to work on this right now, is not helpful. Right. What's more helpful is doing what you can in that space and then saying to them, we should this is what I found, we should probably do a follow-up.
Right.
And it's not because you're looking for more of their cash or green energy. It's because they actually need the help.
I like that green
energy. Yeah, it's come to my workshop on green energy. I call it cashgasm.
Oh my god. Down. Yes.
Sorry, I'll stop with the shameless plug.
We'll have more of those at the end for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, you have somebody in the flow in subspace. You're in the middle of the, and I do believe I've seen it. So I also have been to several tantric events and
that's where we met.
And done a lot of work there, and I think it was there that I was really introduced to the idea of consent in a scene, consent in a space. Having somebody, it doesn't matter what they're doing, but having somebody, let's see, two people just want to cuddle and share space together. And then a third person comes up and says, oh man, I'd really love to join you guys. And it's like, we're in the middle of doing something intimate and hanging out together. All our clothes are on. Nobody's like doing any, we're just holding each other's space. And it's a total change of everything to have a third person come in and join. And this is a stark difference from, I would say, how I was brought up in not respecting that energy, not respecting that space where especially guys would be like perfectly fine, think they are doing perfectly fine to go in and sit with two women and be like all up in their grill when they're in the middle of doing something intimate like that. And then if the women do not speak up for themselves and say no, then everything I did was perfectly fine. I didn't do anything wrong. They didn't call the police on me. How could I be a bad person? Right? So it's that journey from then to now.
Yeah.
And man, I really do want to get into that.
Is that self-awareness though? I mean, how much is that self-awareness, or is that using that incredible intuition that you have to intuit the situation?
I would say today it's more self-awareness.
Okay, yeah.
It's more self-awareness.
Yeah.
So what was it? I want to say it was Andrew Tate. So I'm going to say that. Andrew Tate, he's a famous conservative Yahoo MAGA blogger. And he talked about how there was this space of men being men, and it was right and honorable, and we were doing the right thing where we were going out and providing for women, and they accepted it. And now everything has changed. Women have turned the tables on us, and that's a horrible thing. And I would say that the reality is more to the point, yes, he's still doing the same thing. He's still in the same mindset. And that mindset was never okay.
It was never okay.
It was never okay. It was just being accepted because women didn't have any other choice. Society as a whole didn't have any other choice. I didn't have any other choice than to accept the racism I received. I didn't have a space to be like, oh, this is not good. Now I do. I'm like, and they're like, well, the world's changing and that's not our fault. I'm like, you were always wrong, bro.
I'm not angry. Oh my God. I have a story around that. This will take a moment. There's two things I have to say about that. You're absolutely right. It was never right in the first place, but everybody bought into it. Men, women, everybody. And those who did not buy into it were ostracized. It's different today. There's more people who have become aware. I don't want to use the word woke. They become aware of the fact that, it's not right for one very small segment of the population to overrule everybody else. And I think more importantly, the idea that institutionalized wealth and institutionalized poverty is a real thing. And I'm not sure, I don't know what the solution is. I'm not going to say what the solution is, but I think admitting it as a white man to say, I'm entitled by the very fact I'm a white man, I have this institutional historical wealth, it absolutely has to be done by everybody.
Yeah.
Having said that, so my father is 80s. He grew up in rural Kentucky during the Depression. And for the longest time when we talk politics, which I'm not going to do here, but when we talk politics, he would say one thing, which is, it's all Obama's fault. It's all Obama's fault.
Right.
I'm like, why, Dad? And I don't know. It's just all Obama's fault.
Wow.
And so we went through this for years. And finally, I had him trapped in a house in Kentucky.
during COVID?
No, we went to go visit. He just decided he wanted to go home. I was like, okay, great, let's go home. And so I took him to Kentucky to go visit the grave sites and stuff. It was great. But I had him trapped. And so I kept asking him, like, I'm not letting you leave this table until you explain yourself. How is it Obama's fault? He takes a deep breath, kind of rolls his eyes in his head and says, well, before Obama, we didn't talk about this stuff. And that's it.
Yeah.
That's it, 100%. They're challenged. They have been challenged. Their reality has been challenged. And that's what they can't cotton to. Right?
Yeah.
And once the plug is out, you can't put that plug
right,
in.
Yeah.
And the only way you put that plug in is by squashing people, by doing a fucking Tiananmen Square in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only way that changes. And so it's going to be a very interesting time in the next 10 years. That's all I'll say about that.
Yeah, that is wild. That's really good. That's a really good point. It's the fact that we're talking about it is what makes it so much more difficult.
Yeah, that's where the heresy took place, right? The minute we started talking about the fact that white men may not actually deserve to be in fucking control of everything, that's when everything fell apart. In their minds. For the rest of us, like, oh, fuck, it's about time. But that's, we come back to consent, right?
Yeah.
That was an institutionalized consent structure. Everybody was bought in. Everybody was bought in. And so, as much as there were those who were trying to break out, fighting the hard fight, trying to change it, we can see that institutionalized consent structure is still very much in place. But unfortunately, 55% of us don't consent any longer.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Where do we go from there? You talked about something that I want to bring back. At the very beginning, we talked about when we hit a pothole, when we hit a landmine in someone's trauma space, both the practitioner and the client have a I don't want to say responsible, but kind of have a responsibility-ish to have an ability.
Yeah.
They have an ability to cover and support themselves and be aware of the issue. How so let's say I'm a client. Let's say I'm in a doctor's office, and we're gonna do the John Mulaney bit where he goes to the doctor's office to try to get some Xanax and says, "Well, I pee you like 17 times a day," and the doctor says, "All right, well, I need you to bend over. I'm gonna stick my finger up your ass and see how you're doing, and see how your prostate is." There is societally a strong negative thing associated with standing up for yourself in that moment. You're the expert. I'm the client.
Right.
I'm just a patient coming to you, the doctor. I don't have the right to say no.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the power dynamic, right?
Right.
And that's where, that's ultimately where things go wrong in any professional situation, is that the power dynamic is not respected. So as a patient, your right is to ask questions and to say, I'm not comfortable with what you're about to do to me. And you're 100% correct that there's this power dynamic where you're the expert. So therefore, I shouldn't question you. right? Which is why so many people, especially my parents' age, don't question their doctors.
Right. That's true.
Because they're under the, I don't want to say boomer, because I hate that, but there's that, trust in the experts mentality, which, we should still have, because experts have knowledge, but we can also ask questions as a consumer, as a client. That's our responsibility. Now, I want to be really clear about something. I want to be very careful about not victim blaming here, right? Because if someone enters a trauma space, they may not be aware they're in a trauma space. They may not be know why they're in the trauma space. But as a practitioner, as a professional, we should all be aware of when someone enters a trauma space. I'm not a fucking doctor, but I can be in a business situation. I can be in a corporate situation in the middle of a meeting, and I can watch a coworker go into a trauma space. And it's my responsibility as the leader of that group to nix that in the bud, right? Like,
what does that look like for you when you see that?
It can happen a lot of different ways. I mean, simply someone could be asked to do a presentation. Mm-hmm. Bam. Like, white with fear. Right?
Okay.
There are a lot of people who, just don't like not having the answer to something.
That's true.
Right? And they go into sort of a trauma reaction when they can't answer a question. Right. And there are supervisors who will press them and keep pressing them and pressing them.
And that's going to make it worse.
It's just going to make it worse. Right. Until they've had the worst day of their lives all of a sudden.
Or someone who feels that their job is being done by other people.
Uh-huh.
And so they get very irate very quickly.
Yeah.
When that's not addressed to their satisfaction.
Right. And and those are all trauma responses.
Interesting.
In different ways, right?
Okay.
Now, am I, as a leader or supervisor in a corporate environment, supposed to be a therapist? Is supposed to be able to recognize this stuff? I think everybody should be trauma informed. But having said that, it's not your responsibility to deal with their trauma. It's their responsibility to deal with their trauma.
And what I'm saying is that as a medical professional, you should be aware that it's existing. Mm-hmm. You should be aware that someone's going into that space and... so your responsibility is to be aware of that and not to press them and say, "Oh, well, no, you need to tell me about this."
Right.
Why don't you? What's wrong? You need to tell me more.
Right. I mean, unless you're a trained professional. If you're a trained psychologist, a trained psychiatrist, or a peer counselor, go for it. Have a day. But if you're trained in acupuncture, tantra, energetic work, and not trained in dealing in psychotherapy or trauma-related issues, stop.
Yeah.
Just stop. And you said something earlier I think is really important, the idea that as healers, we're like, I can heal the whole person. It's like, no, you probably only been trained in maybe 1 or 2 modalities, maybe 3, and you can do that. But beyond that, be real careful about what you're effing with. Yeah,
that's a real thing. And, shout out to the Western MD profession. There's a point at which, we acupuncturists drop the hell off because there's a limit to how much acupuncture and herbal medicine can do in solving body issues, where we have to be strong enough to say, you need to talk to your MD about this.
I am so glad you said that.
You need to have an MRI. And it's a strength. It is that thing because we want to be able to cure everything, man.
I have these
needles. I paid so much money to be able to put these needles in your body. You don't even know.
Yeah. I had a partner who watched a friend die of cancer because she refused to go to a Western doctor and only would go to her energetic herbal healer. And her choice is her choice, but she left a daughter behind. And
as I was preparing for this school, 2016, beginning of 2017, I was getting ready to move to Austin, and a good friend of mine, Larry Berlin, same thing, exact same thing. He left 2 kids behind, and his girlfriend was like, "Oh, we'll do some green tea, we'll do some herbal teas to resolve this lymphomatic cancer you have." Went into the hospital, 7 days gone. Yeah.
So I'm so glad you said that.
It's a thing.
Yeah.
It's a thing.
It's a thing.
We've got to be aware.
But it's both and, right? I mean, it's the idea.
Right.
It's the idea of integrative energetics, right? It's not just one thing. There are many paths up the mountain. It's just the point is to get there. If you use a little bit of yoga and a little bit of tantra and a little bit of energy work and a little bit of Western medicine and maybe some supplements and exercise every day and eat right, not the way the government tells you to eat, but actually eat right, then you probably make it through.
Yeah, you'll get it.
But if you stick to one thing and only one thing, and you're very indoctrinated and you refuse to try anything else, chances are you're not taking advantage of all the options that you have.
Yeah.
So
your body has a lot of different ways that it can heal and move and experience the world.
But not just your body, your soul, your energy has a lot of different ways it can experience the world.
Okay.
And not to get dualistic, but I will. This is just a fucking meat sack, right?
Right.
It's just a fucking meat sack. It's a meat sack carrying around some sort of essence that we're all like, but it's your intellect. No, it's not your intellect. Your intellect, yes, it is, but it's, we can get into the whole like mind-body problem, right? And then where's the spirit live? I don't know. But the point being is that we have to feed it all, right? So you can't just feed your spirit and not feed your body.
Yeah.
If you feed your spirit and not your body, well, then you become an ascetic and you're eventually going to die somewhere on a mountaintop. Coolio, but what good are you doing in the world?
Yeah.
Right? If you want to do good in the world, if you want to fulfill your purpose, your dharma, whatever that's supposed to be, then, you need to take care of your meat sack because that's what's carrying you around, as well as your spirit and your mind and everything else.
Oh, I like that. Yeah. Feeling that taking care of the whole person, taking care of the whole being. Oh, I like that.
And that's where acupuncture comes in, right? Isn't it sort of the nexus of energy and body?
We do, we talk about energy, we talk about emotions, we talk about the physical ailments, even when it comes to our herbal medicine. Yeah. There are different herbs that we use for emotional issues. Going again into the gut health, the lower brain. The fact that when our digestive system is on track and moving correctly, our mental processes can work better. So yeah, it's definitely a thing.
Yeah.
It's definitely a thing. All right. Damn, this has been freaking awesome. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Sure.
Once again, ladies and germs, this is Zagareus Wolf, Chief Magic Maker for EZ Energetics. Got that right that time?
That's right. You got it right.
Thank you so much. He's been a Tantra and Yana Yoga teacher for over 10 years, doing workshops for the Bay Area as well as Austin. We have the luxury of having him here in Austin today, but he's a go. He wanders around.
It's true.
He's got 25 years of experience in organizational change, stakeholder engagement, and training around challenging issues, and recently received his 200-hour
200-year
Asana Yoga teacher training at My Vinyasa Practice in Austin, Texas, and he can be found at...
you can find me on Instagram at Ecstatic Zag. That's Ecstatic ZAG. Also on Facebook at the same address. And if you are in Austin and this gets published in time, on December 20th, there will be a winter solstice workshop that I will be guiding at My Vinyasa Practice SoCo.
Nice.
So, check us out there. You can find us on Eventbrite. It's a winter solstice celebration. Release to Receive is the name of the workshop.
Now, you talked about a couple of seminars that I want to go to. So when are you having those?
Those are in the works. I'm going to start a series of online workshops, some for yoga teachers, some for regular everybody. The first one I'm going to do as we close out the year is I'm planning a business basics for yoga teachers. Things about like opening up business bank accounts, getting your DBAs, making sure you have your yoga insurance, things you need to do to prepare for a tax year. Because what most teachers don't realize is that all that training you took in the last year, all those clothes that you bought, all those books that you bought, all those classes that you went to, those are all effing tax deductible, kids.
Yeah.
And you need to take advantage of that because we get paid shite.
Exactly true. Exactly true. Yeah.
So that's the first one. And then the others I'm going to work on in early 2024. I'll be traveling around the world, but I'll be doing online work as I do.
That's so cool.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks, Victor. I appreciate
Happy
that.
for you, man. And then I'm Dr. Druid Victor Manuel, Doctor of Acupuncture and Oriental Medicine, licensed acupuncturist and private practicing Druid, instructor and acupuncturist over at the Texas Acupuncture Research Institute in Dallas, Texas. And you can find me in the podcast at DDDADA, DDDADA, 3 Ds.
Triple DADA.
There you go. Triple DADA. That's who we are and what we do. Thanks again for everybody. Y'all have a great day.